There are a few things in life that you just should not put a number on. The amount of cheese you consume, the amount of women you've slept with, and the days until Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is released, because it seems so far away, especially when no true release date has actually come out. But I wanted to have a true discussion. A discussion about one feature that I think is on many people's minds and has been on my mind for quite a while. And that is modding within the new game. The first game came out in February of 2018, and it was one of the biggest and best medieval open worlds that I've ever seen. Since then, we've had Medieval Dynasty that has, in its own right, been somewhat successful within the smaller scale genre that they're going for. Mount and Blade 2 Battlelord also has been pretty successful, but that's more of a strategy and over the top diplomacy simulator, more than the real down in the earth and story-driven campaign that Kingdom Come Deliverance brought us. But despite its, I guess, almost perfection in terms of a medieval title that we've had in these days, there was one big issue and one huge thing at the time that really grinded my gears, and that was the lack of a modding scene. You see, when the first Kingdom Come came out, developed by Warhorse Studios, they were relatively small, and a lot of it was funded by a Kickstarter. It was a huge Kickstarter, and fans clearly wanted to see this game, and the title was a huge success because of it. This beautiful open world, one of the most detailed that we've ever seen, and of course there was without a doubt a debate on when modding tools would be coming in, and don't get me wrong, they did. It just took a while. In October 2019, modding tools were released. And this is the video we got.
Scald is used for designing and writing quests, journals, and objectives. And of course, we are releasing our modified version of CryEngine Sandbox Editor.
As you can see, it looks great, giving players and fans the opportunity to make content for themselves. But as mentioned, this came out in October of 2019. The game came out in February of 2018. Over a year and a half is the difference between the full game release and the modding tools. And that was a huge issue, because being a single player game, most of the player base had left by now. They'd done everything they wanted to, whether it was side quests or even the main story. Even some DLCs had come out by that point, and players just weren't as hyped as they once were. In order to keep a game alive, you need to make sure content is coming, and it just wasn't possible at the time with the size and the scale that Warhorse Studios as a development company were at. Toby even said in a recent interview, he's the community manager by the way, with another YouTuber, Sexy Biscuit, that they just didn't have the opportunity and the possibilities to put a full team on it. Even later on, when we got things like the Switch port for Kingdom Come Deliverance, they had to outsource that to somebody else because they wanted their main focus to be on the mainline story game. And that is more than fair enough. In fact, they had deadlines for the initial release. They had to get it out at a certain time because of funding, and of course they had a publisher which was Deep Silver at the time, so the game itself had to be there. The way to do that, focus on nothing but the story, the gameplay, and its mechanics. Things, extras like DLCs and even modding tools had to be a later thought, something that came in at a later date because of the lack of resources. But there were mods. I think some people might remember I made some videos back in the day. In fact, there was talk of a multiplayer mod as well. I'd see if I could delve into the depths of my channel to find some of the gameplay from that, of people running around with horses.
It shows some type of multiplayer thing in progress of Kingdom Come Deliverance. Now, it's safe to say that there is nothing complete at all in this. It's just a very early thing called Horse Sync, where basically they've managed to get 3 people in Kingdom Come Deliverance playing together. Now you might think, what are you on about? These are just horses. Well, the reason behind this is they've not actually managed for it to be able to show the player yet. So all you can see is 3 horses. As you can see from the player's point of view, you can actually see what you'd normally see in Kingdom Come Deliverance. But that's what the other 2 guys are seeing, but you can only see their horses, not their bodies themselves.
There was also a third-person mod, which I actually used quite a lot and was kind of cool and successful. Awful for combat, don't get me wrong, but you know, for actually exploring the world was cool, and for making cool thumbnails. A lightsaber mod, that was an addition, and there were mods that were promised. Do you know the huge Game of Thrones mod that's now for Attila Total War? Well, that was initially just going to be based on Kingdom Come Deliverance. It was going to be this full open world and overhaul for the Kingdom Come Deliverance game, with new NPCs, factions, characters, storylines, and the map itself being transformed into the Game of Thrones world. Remember, this was 2018. This was before Season 8. This was peak Game of Thrones. Yet that never came to be. They eventually released a statement saying that there just wasn't the modding tools for it, and of course there wasn't the demand anymore. Players had pretty much left the title now, and putting that amount of work and effort and money and time into it just didn't seem feasible, even if the modding tools did allow it. Something that has been mentioned in the new game, once again in this interview with Sexy Biscuit, Toby said that they're hoping if modding tools will be in, it will be sooner. It's not going to be on release, I very much doubt that, but hopefully sooner. And not just that, but also making it easier to use, since the modding tools, as far as I'm aware, were not perfect. And that's going to be a really big change, and hopefully going to bring some of that longevity out, even though Kingdom Come 2 is going to be a much larger title in itself. But why do they need to do this? Well, I think if we look at the biggest examples, well, the biggest one being Skyrim, being a game that has been released 50 million times over the last 40 years, that title has still a huge player base and a huge fan base, and it's not all that dissimilar to Kingdom Come Deliverance. Okay, sure, KCD was the first in a franchise, Skyrim was the fifth in a franchise. They'd done plenty before that. It already catered towards a big fan base, and they'd grown it not just from the Skyrim franchise itself, but the Fallout franchise and other games that Bethesda had done. Then when modding tools were implemented into that, it surged the game to new heights with massive overhauls and completely, I mean, the Skyrim Play Together mod still blows my mind to this day, introducing multiplayer into this huge open world. But that has shown why modding is so important in single player games, because it is one of the most popular titles of all time. The hype for the next one is unprecedented, and that is why I think it needs to come in the second KCD. Witcher 3 has just also released its red kit, and it is quite late. Okay, speaking of late modding tools, we're 9 years after the release of Witcher 3, and only now they are bringing in modding tools, at least official ones. We've already had mods for Witcher 3, and it's already been incredibly modded in the past. Its community is so strong, and once again with CD Projekt Red having such a great reputation as a development company on the most part, and also bringing in a huge franchise like The Witcher that has its own Netflix specials, that's been a huge book series as well, it was not a surprise that it was easier for them to keep a fan base and a core going, especially when that game is held up as such perfection within the open world market. So yes, they brought in their modding tools 9 years later, but that seems like it's only revived the game even more. And that looks like Witcher 3 is going to have even more longevity because of it. But what about a more recent game? What's done that? At least in the same space and the same kind of budget. Well, Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord also did the same. They released their modding tools 7 months after the release of the game, or at least should I say the release of the early access, and that brought in things like the Realm of Thrones mod, once again the Game of Thrones mods, Warhammer mods, Roman mods, Eagle Rising as one of the most popular mods, and a huge overhaul as well, and absolutely beloved. But not just single player, multiplayer mods as well. Sword and Musket seems to be very, very popular. I made a video on one of the native Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord events a few months ago, and that had a full reskin to bring in some extra arms and armor, and it looks gorgeous. Then we also have the multiplayer Persistent Empires mods, bringing a Mount and Blade style game into the open world, having serfs collecting resources, blacksmiths, crafting arms and armor for soldiers and knights, having whole ranking systems, having voice over IP within Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord, having castles and factions and going to war with each other. That is a huge mod, and that has all been made possible because of the later modding tools. This has shown how important it is to keep a community alive, and I think KCD is not necessarily within this vein. Warhorse Studios definitely have a vision of what they want, and they have said that that's what their main priority is, to stick to a certain vision. But if they can include the community, even just slightly, making it slightly more successful, for not necessarily the biggest mods, but even the smaller ones. We did get some smaller mods that were helpful, but they were mostly fixes and bug patches. But I just hope that they can make that and turn it around for the second game. Do I think it's going to come on release? No, probably not. And we're still looking for like a late 2024 release date. But even 6-7 months after the release, a lot like Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord did, would be incredibly helpful, because having such a bigger influx of fans is going to need to stay around. This game is going to be so much bigger than the first KCD. In order to keep them around, I think this is probably our best direction. Currently, there are no plans for DLCs, but I'm sure we will see them eventually. KCD 2 is going to be double the size of the first one, so it's going to take so much more time before people even start thinking about that, however. But nonetheless, I think this has to be one of the most requested features for the new game, and I can't wait to see what they decide to do with it, because surely it's going to come in at some point. However, let me know what you think down in the comments below. But until then, make sure you stick around the channel for more Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 news.